What's up, Sports Spectrum? It's Matt Forte with my guy Jason Romano, my wise counsel. Jay Nice is his nickname, by the way. I got to throw that in there every time.
Jay Nice.
I'm sitting
That's
here with
it.
Gavin Sheets, but Jay Nice, tell me, give us a little background on Gavin.
Yeah, so it's great to have Gavin with us on Sports Spectrum with the Chicago White Sox. He was a second-round pick in 2017 MLB draft. Actually drafted a couple times before that, Gavin, too, right? Both by, looks like Atlanta and the White Sox in the second round of 2017. Played your college ball at Wake Forest and is, for the first time, arbitration eligible, which may be too much info for our audience, but that's a big deal in the baseball space. He made his debut back in June of 2021 and just finished his fourth season with the Chicago White Sox, and it's great to have Gavin here.
Yeah. Tell us about the draft process, I would say, because it's a lot different than football, which I'm used to. How do you decide when to accept, because you were drafted in 14,
Yeah.
and then you decided in, what was it, 17?
17.
To actually, join the team?
Yeah, it's a crazy process. For me, I always was set on, one big goal of mine was to play in the ACC. Growing up, I always wanted to play in the ACC. My dream school was UNC, and it was pretty crazy. It came down to UNC and Wake Forest, but God led me to Wake. I trusted the coaches there and the atmosphere there. And so when I got drafted, I knew that it was going to take a sizable amount of money to get me to go to pro ball and skip that experience that was always my short-term goal instead of the big leagues. And it worked out. God led me to Wake Forest, and I'm forever grateful. I love my time there and my experiences at Wake.
Yeah. So your debut in 2021, talk to us about that, because that's always something I remember. My rookie debut,
Sure.
which is different. But we were on Sunday Night Football in Indianapolis against the Colts and Peyton Manning, which is a rerun of the 2006 Super Bowl, and it's Sunday Night Football. And I know I had crazy nerves. So what about you? How did you, if you did have nerves,
yeah.
how was that? And if not, how did you remain solid?
It was, the coolest part, I think, was getting the call from AAA, getting called into the manager's office with all the coaches around, and just being told that you're going to the big leagues. There's just so many emotions that go through. You make your phone calls to my wife, my family, and just my grandparents, everybody that was with me along in the journey. And then obviously it's packing up, traveling, getting to the stadium in Chicago, and we were playing the Minnesota Twins. I'll never forget it, and just pure emotion. Just I think it wasn't real until I walked in and saw my jersey hanging there with my last name, and that's when it became real. You get the call and all the emotions, but then when you walk into the clubhouse and see your jersey hanging there with your new number, and no, it was one of the coolest days of my life. Obviously, just adrenaline the whole game, and but also a piece when you step on the field. It's kind of like, this is okay. Now I'm playing the game that I know. The whole day is completely different than anything you've ever done. But as soon as you step on the field, it's the same game that you've played your whole entire life and love.
Yeah. There's nothing like you. Those are memories like you memory bank those. You'll never forget those. I remember my first game too, and being able to score a touchdown. You got a hit in your first game. I think your first RBI too in that game as well. So those are things you never forget. Now, when we talk about the big leagues and minor leagues and getting called up and then even being brought back down, to me, that can play like a mental game with you, right? Like even the connotation between big league and minor league. Walk me through how you kind of keep your solid, I guess, how does it not affect you personally, your emotions, when you do get called up or brought back down?
Yeah, it's, I think you have to remove yourself sometimes from the business side of sports. In baseball, a lot of times, a lot of decisions are made are business decisions. Not always, whether you're doing what you're supposed to be doing at the big league level or not. And for me, I got sent down in August, and I'll never forget the president at the time called me and he said, it's nothing that you've done on the field. It's just a business decision that we have to make. And obviously, it's one of the harder things to go deal with, and you go back down to AAA, but. No, I think you keep that same attitude that, whatever field I'm on, I'm going to, give God the glory, and I'm going to play as hard as I can. And, when I get the opportunity to come back up, you make the most of it. And so you kind of control what you can control, and was able to come back up in September. And then, we were in the playoffs that year, so I got to start in the playoffs for them. And so I think that just trusting that and allowing myself to control what I can control and not getting caught up in, some of the things that the business side that you have no control over.
Yeah, I tell you what, man. If it wasn't for the Lord, I don't know if I would have made it through the business side
100%.
of football, man. Because they're like, oh, business is business. It's personal. Business is personal because you're talking about what you do,
Sure.
and I think it benefits us to know and to express that God has given us that talent and to recognize that.
Absolutely.
And because if not, we can't run the chance of being upset, unforgiving, and bitter, and that's always going to eat us up inside instead of someone else.
Absolutely.
So it's all good. When it comes to your faith, you mentioned that and how that has kept you solid with being in the big leagues and the mental toil of sometimes, not knowing production wise, where your value is not placed in the game. We did a day of faith together at the White Sox Stadium. Talk about that, because that's a huge thing, and it's not something that the Bears have ever done. Like me, in the NFL, never done something like that. But I thought that was super cool to be able to be bold enough to say, you know what, can we do a day of faith at a game beforehand with the other team as well?
Yeah, that was one of the cooler things I've ever been a part of, and to have you come out at obviously a huge part of the community in Chicago, and for you to come out and your willingness to share the word and get some people to testify to Christ that day was pretty incredible. But I think a lot of times in sports you don't know why you're in the place that you're in. And, obviously it was an extremely tough year in Chicago this year with the White Sox. And, you see some of the members of your team get traded and go to teams that are having winning seasons. And, I've kind of seen the good and the bad in Chicago in terms of being on a playoff team and then being on a team like last year. And you always ask yourself, you have plans in your heads of how you think things should go. And, you want to go to a team that's winning. You want to be a part of seasons like that. But, to be a part of that was, it gives you perspective on why God has you in the place that you're in. And my wife and I kind of spearheaded the Faith and Family Day. Was the first time that I've ever been a part of one in Chicago, and I think the first time in at least 20 years that they've done one. So to be a part of that and to see fans come out, about 500 to 1,000 fans come out and have local community church singing for us, and just getting guys on the team from all different walks of faith, guys that had just started walking with the Lord, to people that have walked with the Lord for their whole lives, to have you come out and share your testimony. It was such an incredible day, and it just kind of gives the reason. It's God answering your questions. Why am I here? Well, this is part of why I'm here, to spread the word and to share the gospel. And it's so much greater than baseball. It's so much greater than, we get caught up in our identity of, oh, I'm a baseball player. No, you're not a baseball player. It's what you do. And to be able to be a part of that day and share the word and just the way the fans, gravitated to it and just the feedback that we had was pretty incredible.
Yeah. It transcends the sport, right? It gets to the point about, sports is cool, but real life happens.
Absolutely.
And we even had Spanish speaking, players who came and even testified and gave a lot, like their favorite verse in Spanish. And it was just, man, it was reminiscent of heaven, man. Yeah. Like, it's going to be all nations, all people of all, walks of life and being there. So I thought that was absolutely cool. I hope we get to do that again.
Absolutely.
But then I wanted to talk about, so in Chicago, like you said, when you went to the playoffs early on in your career, I went my third year in the league, and we went all the way to the NFC Championship, didn't make it to the Super Bowl, and then 7 more years after that, a drought. I never touched the playoffs again after that. So with this year, there's ups and downs when it comes to sports. With this year being a tough year for the Sox, it was kind of magnified, as they love to pick on, when that stuff happens. And we know how the media is. You're better than you actually are, and then you're worse than what they say, or what they say is worse than what you really are. So how was navigating that time of a year where it's tough statistically on everybody, even though yours wasn't as bad as some people? How do you not have pride to be like, well, I did my job, but everybody else is kind of.
Yeah, it was a lot to navigate. I'd be lying if I sat here and said, oh, it was super easy to go by. You just leave it at the field. Because as you know, it's impossible to do. Every year you come to spring training, you have high hopes. You want to, obviously my first year getting to the playoffs, you want to replicate that over and over and over. And you don't realize how special those seasons are, unfortunately, until they're over. You don't really enjoy them in the moment because you're so focused on what your job at hand is and getting the playoffs and winning, and then you kind of get out of it and you're like, man, that was special. But going through a season like this, I think the biggest thing for me was just being able to not get caught up in results. It wasn't the results, it was the process. It was not my individual self is not what our record is. My individual self is not what my statistics are. Although being able to balance family, family calling you and getting caught up in it as well, and not making baseball my idol. That was the biggest thing. Being a man of faith in the clubhouse, leading guys in Bible study, leading guys in chapel, and trying to find speaking on what was actually important in my life. Obviously baseball is a huge part of my life and it is very important to me, but it's not everything. And being able to separate, the results and the statistics with, leading a Bible study, getting guys to faith, getting guys to chapel, walking guys in their faith. And, as difficult it was at times and being able to separate those two things, I think that, when you take a step back from the season and you look back at things like faith and family and some of the guys that grew to Christ, and you realize that the season wasn't a failure in the grand scheme of life.
Was it humbling? Because I've had those seasons where the previous one, it was like Pro Bowl and awesome, and then you've had these ones where it's like you start to think, man, is it me? Am I like slipping? Is my play slipping? So it could humble you, but also I think within that humility, it gave me a different perspective. Like God really showing me that the playing field is the mission field.
Yeah.
Like you talked about being in the clubhouse and leading guys to faith and doing Bible studies and things like that. How important is that perspective for you?
It's extremely important. And in a season, 162 games, and you're there every single day, and you're with your brothers every single day. I mean, I'm with the guys more than I'm with my wife and my family. So walking with these guys and building those relationships, it's extremely important, and it puts things in perspective. But at the same time, we're gifted to do something on the field that God's given us the ability to do, and it's given us this platform. And so at the same time, it is, what we do on the field is extremely important as well. So it's kind of that balance between the two things. So obviously it's something that we want to improve on next year and make sure that from a baseball standpoint, we don't want to go through that again. But while also continuing to grow those relationships and staying focused on that. So finding that balance is something that I found really important this year. The balance between, growing spiritually in the clubhouse as well as, taking care of the business on the field.
Yeah.
Gavin, I got to ask you because I didn't realize, I was thinking about that last name Sheets, and I'm like, I remember as a kid having a baseball card, Baltimore Orioles, Larry Sheets, probably mid-'80s, and I'm like, that's your dad.
Yep.
So, which is so cool. So I would love you to kind of explain to our audience, what was it like being around? I mean, you were born in 96, so maybe it wasn't even when your dad was still playing. I'm trying to remember when he retired. But just being around a guy who played in the big leagues and your dad, I'm sure he had a huge impact on your life. But also how your faith really took shape, because you were a strong man of faith. I'd love to know the kind of dynamics of coming to know Christ.
Yeah, so he played obviously a huge impact in my life. But he retired in '94, right before I was born. But I think it was kind of nice because I had him at home 12 months of the year. My sister was 10 years older than me, so she was during his career, and I had him. He was around all the time. I knew stories of baseball. I was able to go to Camden Yards with him and grow up at the stadium with him, and going in and seeing the impact he still had on fans, which was really cool for me. And just kind of looking up to him through that lens. But he always instilled in me, what you are as a baseball player and who you are as a human. And from day one, my mom and dad both, and my grandparents. I'm fortunate enough to grow up in a family that is multi-generational in the gospel and in the Word, and so that's always been the number one thing that's been preached to me is no matter what you're on the field is not who you are as a person. And
that's good.
So going through this year was pretty crazy as well, because my dad was, we lost 21 straight games, and the last team to do that was my dad's team in '87 or '88. So,
yes, they're blaming all the Sheets.
Yeah,
if is not where you want to follow in dad's footsteps, right?
If I have a son, I don't know if he's going to be picked up by any team, because people are going to be
White Sox.
No, people are going to be worried about that streak coming up in the third generation. But
man.
No, he just was able to talk to me the whole time and just keep things in perspective. What's important, what isn't. You're not who your record is. You're not who your stats are. And so having that voice and someone that because it was obviously a historic season, and it's not something you want to ever be a part of. And to have someone so close to me that was able to kind of walk me through that and keep things in a great perspective, when everything around you is kind of like in uncharted territory.
Yeah. Speaking of having, children and a family, you're a married, man. And did you feel pressure, I guess, growing up that your dad is a former professional athlete? Because that can happen of like, man, he's a pro MLB player. I have to do that as well. Did you feel any pressure to make it?
Yeah, I think, you always knew that pressure was there. You always understood that, obviously playing baseball, I knew that I was stepping into where my dad had made it, especially growing up in Baltimore too. So everybody locally, kind of when I had the Sheets name on my back, I knew what came along with that. But the nice thing was that any pressure that came was from outside the family. My dad was fantastic about that. It was just, it was never, you have to do this. It was, he would never make me go hit. He'd never make me go play baseball. It was, hey, Dad, I want to go hit. Dad, I want to go do this. And then he'd be there. He'd be like, all right, let's go. And that was one thing that he told me from an early age. He said, don't ever think you have to play baseball because I played. I want you to do it because you loved it. If you don't want to play baseball, that's completely fine. I'll support you in any way possible. And both my parents were great about that. There was never any pressure about that. So any pressure that came was from outside people or just from myself, just understanding that, hey, I love playing baseball. I understand what I'm getting myself into in terms of, my dad doing this and being in the same city and hometown. But they were both great about that.
Yeah, I got two boys, and I've always told them too, is like, you don't have to be me. I tell them that because there could be, I can just imagine growing up and being, a household name at some point, and people knowing your stats and things like that, to tell them you don't have to be me. God has made you in His image, but He's made you different. Yeah. You're not going to be a carbon copy of me. You don't have to be. So any advice to any of the players out there, just let your children know. Take that burden off of them. Yeah. They have to be their own person in Christ.
Yeah, my dad always told me, he said, I've done my career. My career's over. I've did all that I wanted to do. I had my last at bats. He goes, you're not living out my career now. This is your time to do what you want to do, and I'll support you in any way.
Yeah. Last question, and we'll get you out of here, man. I just want to know, for our listeners and believers out there, what does it look like to be the man of the house, the faithful man? Because your father and your grandfather, that faith has been transcended. Yeah. And same thing with me. My grandfather was a pastor, and he passed it down to my father. Same thing with me and to my kids. What does that look like to you, to be a man of faith leading your family?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the thing. It's leading your family. Being willing to lead your family in any way possible, being able to be the first one to pray, being the first one to be in the Word. But it's also being able to, have your wife, be able to listen to her and allow her to, when times of need and you need, like when I'm struggling with something, is being able to come to her and submit to her a little bit too. I think that takes a lot of leadership for men to do. It's tough. There were times during the season where I was hurting and I needed her to lean on. And, sometimes in leadership, you need to rely on the people around you. We want to be strong, and we want to lead, and we want to, put on this face that everything's okay. And sometimes it's okay to come to her and say, look, I need you right now. I need your help during this time. And that was something that I found, a learning experience too this year, was being able to ask her for help, ask her for prayer, being in the Word with her, leaning on her. Because a lot of times as men, we don't want to do that, and we think that being the leader of the household is someone that can always get through things and always put on this face that we're okay. And sometimes in this world we're in, being a pro athlete, and sometimes we need help from the people that are really close to us in the support system. So that's something I was able to kind of let down my guard with her and bring her in, and because it's teamwork. Being in a marriage is obviously, it's the same thing as it's teamwork, and you got to be able to pull on both sides.
Yeah, you and your wife have a beautiful relationship, and I know that just from even the Day of Faith, you guys y'all did that together. Yeah. And I think that's important. Doing things together, whether it be, serving or, in faith, those things are so important, because I know many a times, people may get the connotation of leading, it not being servant leadership. Right. I always tell guys, there's no such thing as leadership without servant leadership. You don't call people to do things that you wouldn't yourself sacrifice first. Sure. And then also when it comes to relationally with your wife, I wouldn't be the leader or the man that I am without her pushing me forward. And I know that Kayla does that.
Yep.
And it's been cool to see that. But man, we appreciate your time. Thanks for the
you.
insight and
awesome.
taking
Absolutely.
us through your childhood a little bit and your career.
Appreciate you having me on. This is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin.
Hey, thanks for watching Sports Spectrum here on YouTube. You can click our next video, or you can check out our website, sportsspectrum.com.